Tonight, I'm going to go through an introduction of SARTopo. I'm going to go through feature comparisons, basic usage, getting you up to where you can put a good map together for like a hasty search potentially, putting basic objects on the map, and really touching on all the functionality, some of which is pretty hidden by necessity because you have a limited amount of interface that you can work with. And some of the things aren't entirely obvious. You kind of have to learn them. So we're going to get to where we can create an effective map, some initial assignments, go through the printing functionality, and then how you would distribute maps via Avenza and or the SARTopo mobile app, which we pretty much run all of our searches on now. I would say 90% of Marin County searches are paperless. We don't even print maps anymore. Everything is just real-time online. So that's pretty cool. So I want to start by just talking about the different versions here briefly for people that aren't super familiar with it. But essentially, there are three basic versions, and now there's a fourth one, which is the mobile app. But essentially, SARTopo, which we've all are using in this business, the beauty of it is it's collaborative over the internet, unlike pretty much anything else. You can add any layers you want to it. It has full mission planning, including team assignments, tracking, clues, all kinds of new functionality. The offline version works pretty much identically to the online version. And as of about 18 months ago, the two now sync with one another automatically. So if you're in a place with sketchy internet, it's best to start with the offline version. And then when your internet kicks in once in a while, it'll sync up through the cloud and everything will be synced up rather than the other way around and just fumbling with a bad connection. So that can be a pretty useful thing to do. Obviously, the civilian version of this is SARTopo, which has a lot of the same functionality, but lacks the SAR mission planning stuff. And then finally, the SARTopo mobile app, which came out about a year ago and is now pretty mature at this point, can be used in SARTopo mode, which we do for almost all searches now. And it has 80% of the functionality of the desktop version and lets you do things like real-time syncing and so forth. And I'm going to kind of skip over a lot of this, but essentially, you're going to want to join a team account. I think Nevada County already has one. Normally, these classes are a little more diverse in terms of agencies, but a team account does a lot of great things for you. It essentially allows you to save your maps and share your maps to a team account. It lets you save your custom map layers to that team account and custom symbols too. And you can do things like create secret map URLs, and you can also fine tune the sharing levels with people. And I did this before I was working with Matt on this, but it's a pretty inexpensive product for what it does, and it's kind of changed the world of SAR in my opinion. I don't know how you would run searches without SARTopo at this point. So you start the application by going to a browser. What I'm going to do is basically switch over now to go into the interface. I'm going to walk through the various points of the interface. I'm going to also talk about some of the new things that have changed in the interface. I'm sure most of you know that the new, pretty radical change in the interface appeared about a month ago or so. And some things are in different places, but the idea there is that it helps the company share code bases between the mobile app and the desktop app a lot more. And it makes development of new features a little more straightforward. And it also kind of improves familiarity because the desktop version will start to look more like the mobile version and vice versa. And you don't have two completely different interfaces. So with that, let me switch over to a blank map here, and I'm going to start walking around the map and talking about how things are set up and how things are used. So 1 second, I'm going to switch my share. New share, map, there we go. Everyone see a blank SARTopo now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, is that geometry look okay on your screens? Sometimes I have to guess a little bit to make it legible and everything. Okay, so here's your base interface. Essentially, let's start with logging in. Up here in the upper right, for people that haven't used this a lot, you can sign in with your Google accounts. In the case of this class, you've registered an email account that is going to be used with the app here. And once you log in, you'll see your user ID now appears in the upper right corner, unlike before where it used to appear in the upper left corner. So your account settings will now appear inside your user ID link up there. And you'll notice things like maps and stuff don't appear here anymore. They're in a different place now. So up here, if you're an administrator of a team account or something, as I am, then I can go in here and I can administer my account and do all kinds of things like that from here. But generally, once you're logged in, you don't have to worry about that too much. The first thing you're going to see of use really is that you have your map data under your data. So that's your familiar map layers and PDFs and things that you've generated. In this case, you see a list of maps. I can sort them by my accounts. So these are my personal maps in your account, MLPI class maps there. And then I have my Marin search and rescue maps, and I can share those back and forth between different teams that I'm affiliated with pretty directly. So that makes it super efficient for those of you that haven't done this very much. If I start creating a map while you're rolling out to the scene, you open up your mobile app, your desktop app, and you're on the team account, you'll see the maps that I've been working on automatically. Other things like bookmarks are now available. They've been around about a year or so, but if you're working on a search for another county and all, you can bookmark that and keep track of it. PDFs that you've generated and want to save for certain amounts of time are in here as well. Tracks that you save in the mobile app can be saved in here and viewed in here as well. I'm going to talk a lot more about this, but if you set up custom layers for your team, they can be stored in here and they can be shared back and forth between your team account and so forth. There's another new feature that's less than a year old called Map Sheets, which is very powerful and easy to use. So we're going to talk about that as well. I've created tons and tons of map sheets for my county that we use. You can also have custom icons. We have some that we use on our team. And then you have some information here if you want to set up an offline instance of the app. So essentially that information is all stored there. All your data is hidden there behind that single little button. Next thing I want to talk about is setting up basically the interface on the desktop. So if I click on settings here, most of the important things are stored here. You can turn on things like a UTM grid if you want it, or you can leave it off. I tend to leave it off because most of the time it's just another line on the screen that I really don't need to see. Once in a while, I'll print my maps with it though, just to give people more of a frame of reference. But you can turn that on and off. I usually leave that checked. I like to show my labels for various items on my map by folder. And if you do that, once you get into the folder side over here on the left and you have a bunch of objects listed, you can turn off the labels for those objects by folder. So you can turn off all the little marker labels, but you can keep the assignment labels and things like that. So that's just a good place to leave that. Datum WGS84, mixed units. I tend to leave that on, and I'll usually start with UTM for my primary coordinates and then degrees minutes. Why is that? Helicopters. Most of our helicopter people like to have degrees and minutes, decimal minutes. So I'll tend to leave my units kind of defaulted like that. And once I'm set up on a browser, I really don't have to touch that again unless I want to change something midstream. So here we go. All good. So moving around the map. It's pretty straightforward. You grab it with a mouse button and you can drag it around. You can zoom in and out pretty easily like this, and so forth. And so navigation itself is pretty straightforward. I want to talk about collaboration for a second. So I'm going to jump over to a map that actually has a bunch of stuff on it already. And there are a bunch of, I'm going to come back to this map in a minute, but this is a live real search that we've did many operational periods on here in Marin, but there are many sharing functions in here, and we'll talk about them off and on throughout the course. But if you go into this little information button right here, you will see the name of your map as you have saved it, and you will see sharing options that have already been made. I've created a sharing mode called update here and I've got a URL that I can send out to people. So if I simplify that and go back to my blank map, let's just say this is my search map. I'm going to put one little item on here, which I'll talk about more in a minute. I'll just call this ICP, and I'll put a command post label on it. And we're going to get into all of this in a little bit. But now I've got an object on my map, and the system will prompt me to save this map. So I'm going to call this test map, and I'm going to save it just to my account for right now, but I could save it to, actually, I'll save it to the MLPI class team account. So all of you will be able to see that there. And I hit save, and that little green button up here, the little disk drive, goes away because I've saved it. And now everything I add to this map from now on is going to be automatically saved to the server. There's no need to press save or anything like that. If there's a communication error between your system and the server, it will flash up and say, hey, I might not have saved that last thing because I lost connection. So anyway, everything's saved now. And as I mentioned, I have the right now to share that map with others. So let's talk about that for a minute. If you go down here, I have a map called test map. This is the URL for the map, which is fine. So anyone can type this URL in and can see my map. But I want to share this map for search purposes. And Matt has really improved the granularity of this sharing process over the last several months. And it makes using the mobile app that much easier as well. So let's talk about creating a shareable link for a map. I want to create a shareable link. And you can see here, there are different ways I can share this map. I could share it with people I don't trust to screw it up. And I can share it to them as a read-only map. If I'm running a search, mutual aid, I've got a bunch of people coming in and I want them to add their tracks and their clues and markers to my map, I'm going to give them update rights, which means they can add things to my map, but they can't delete my assignments and they can't delete things that I put on the map. They can only change things that they themselves have put on the map. Does that make sense? So update right is usually a good way to go. Let's just say I'm doing that right now. I hit OK, and you can see it generates a new map URL right here. And if I click on that and open it up in a browser, it's going to take me right back to this map, but I'm going to automatically have the right to update that map and add things to that map. So if I mailed that out to you all right now, you would be able to add things to my map. Alternatively, you see this little barcode thing. If I click on that, it will actually generate a barcode here, which is pretty handy because people can scan it in with their phone and go straight to it on their browser if they want. Or you could hang it up on a wall at the ICP and people could scan it in and see it, have a live look at the map, and so forth. So having a barcode is a QR code is a pretty handy thing as well. So getting back here, there are also full writing updates you can give to people, and that will allow them to delete anything that's on the map. So you have to be quite careful with that. So most of the time, if I'm giving this to incoming searchers, I'm going to give them update rights. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Okay, excellent. So now we've got our map on here. I'm going to talk about a few more things that are on here before we get into detail. So right up here is a search box, super handy. It's pretty much as smart as Google because it kind of is Google. So you can do kind of free form language on here. I can say find Alpine Lake in Marin, and it'll go to Alpine Lake in Marin. But if I say go to Alpine Lake in Alpine County, it's smart enough to understand plain English and take me there. So this can be a really nice, quick way to get you where you want to be, and very handy. Likewise, in the lower right corner, you see the little where am I button. Assuming you have an internet connection and some sort of GPS connectivity, you can push that button and it will take you to the center. Oh, there's my house. So it knows where my house is and took me there. So you can do that either way, or I can go back now to Alpine Lake in Marin. So that's a pretty handy way to navigate. The other thing that's cool is once you start getting objects on here, you can click on any of these things that appear in your left-hand column, and it will center the map on those. So if I want to just jump to the command post for the search, I press that button, and now my map is centered on the command post button that I put on there, or a marker that I put on there. So there's lots of ways to kind of quick navigate around the map. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. Moving on to what I think is one of the most important things. I want to spend a fair amount of time on this, which is map layers. And I kind of want to talk about the different map layers and why they are so useful and why you want to change between different layers. So conceptually, there's like 3 or 4 different types of map layers in here. There are base layers like this, OpenStreetMap in this particular case. I can actually lay map overlays on top of this, and I'll talk about those first, just because I've already got a base map set up here. So on top of whatever base map I have, I can easily add other things. And you can see here things like contours. Matt has created this layer called Map Builder Overlay, which is very nice. And this kind of vacuums up all the knowledge in OpenStreetMap and so forth, and incorporates that all into an overlay layer. So it's a transparent overlay where only the objects that you have will appear here. So the underlying map remains unchanged. So in this particular case, all the little trails start to show up on this map, but they aren't there when I don't have the overlay on, or maybe they are in this case a little bit. But the overlay gives me a nice clear map, including things like outlines of lakes and so forth. The other thing I want to touch on, and this is brand new, is on the right-hand side, you now see letters. And those letters are all shortcuts. And what's really cool is once you get to be a dialed planner, these shortcuts are really great. And they expand up to and including shortcuts for creating assignments and things like that. So instead of going click, 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 you can just hit a letter and be right there. So in this case, you can see contours is letter C. So I'm going to hit a C, and all of a sudden, all the contours in my area will pop up. I can change the type of contours I have. I can go to smallest 10 feet ones, which are kind of overkill here. But if I use mixed, that's usually the good default. And I can just hit C, 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 and they turn on and off, which is super handy. Same thing with the Map Builder Overlay, which is an O. So I can hit O and turn that layer on and off. That's really handy too. Sometimes when you're kind of doing an A-B thing, looking back and forth at something. Something that you guys in Nevada County, I'm sure, use all the time, and any alpine search we work on is slope shading. So you see S is slope angle shading, and it gives you a super high resolution LiDAR quality. I think it's like 1 foot resolution, something like that. So it's a very precise slope measurement from satellites. So when I'm doing assignments, and we'll talk about this later on in the course, but one of the big things that goes into my thought process about how I design alpine assignments is turning slope shading on and off and making sure I'm not sending people straight into cliffs, or if I really want to search that area, I'm sending them to the bottom of a cliff band. So this tool makes it really easy to kind of see where you have serious issues, or in this case, like where I could safely send some people into an area here potentially, which is not all that obvious otherwise. Contour lines themselves don't always give you that information. So that's really good. So I want to talk about fires for a second. And some of you may know Matt and I have been working a lot on trying to get some standardization on fire evacuation planning and some of the post-fire work that we've all been involved in to varying degrees. So to that extent, there are some new functions that are in here. You can see that we have parcel data. So if I click on that, this is for the whole US basically. Everything will pop up by address. If I zoom in most areas, I can even go and say, who owns the lot? So you can see here, I get a name on every lot. That's pretty handy. It's not going to be perfect, but it's a lot better than not having any idea who lives there or who owns that property. And you can default it to site address as well, and so forth. You can turn that off. Another layer that's super handy and is new for entire US are structures. So this is derived by Microsoft using their AI agent and a bunch of high resolution satellite data. So they've generated a footprint with every structure they can detect from multi-directional satellite imaging. And that should be available for everywhere in the country now. And I think from what I've seen, it's actually better than the stuff we had on our own in-county GIS databases. So both of these are very handy. And while I'm here, let me just show you the measure tool before I get to map layers again. So this is another cool tool. If I go over here, you see this little ruler that used to be up at the top here and measurements. Now it's down here. If I click on that, you're going to see some newer things here. You do see some shortcuts here, like Shift D and Shift C and so forth. But the one I want to mention right now is I can count parcels for like fire exact evacuation. So if I click parcel count, I can go in here on a neighborhood and say, we want to evacuate, this area right here. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to click back down. Right, oops. Obviously, I would be a little more careful when I'm doing that. I double click that and it tells me there's 223 parcels there. I can do the same thing for the number of structures. It'll tell me how many buildings are inside that footprint. And there's soon be a new feature where you can do the same thing within any shapes that you put on the map. So heading into the fire season, I just wanted to give people the heads up that these tools are in here and they're evolving quickly and they are super handy.
Rich, how often is the structure map updated?
Well, it was just updated. I mean, it was just installed like, I don't know, 5 or 6 months ago. Matt may be away at the moment, but I don't know. I think he can download it pretty quickly on a, once a year basis or something like that. The things that it doesn't catch, and we found this out in like the North Complex West fire last year, is that it didn't really catch mobile homes that people didn't have registered with the assessor and they were dragging them around or living in an RV. So there were some exceptions, but we really found the need for this during those fires. And just as a side note, one of the things we did is talk about remote planning. We really struggled because we saw so many buildings in the fire footprint that we couldn't, that weren't showing up on any databases. So I actually got like 20 SAR members from my team. We got on Google satellite one night and everybody's job was to put a dot on every structure in the county, basically, and in the fire area. And we went through that and it only took a few hours, 3 or 4 hours. And all of a sudden we had tools then that could count those. And we had a complete picture of everything that was in the county as of 6 months earlier. So that was super handy. Another cool feature of SARTopo, being able to do things like that. So back to overlays here. Another one I do want to talk about since we're on fire, you have fire history and you have live fire. So let me mention that briefly. And there's various versions of fire here, but let me go up into Napa area and you can see here, it has a nice history of fires. So you can see how recently things burned and where the perimeters were. But more importantly, you get a daily update on fires that are live multiple times a day from satellites. A lot of these are bad data, but here's the one up in Yuba right now, right? So what's cool here is it will show you, and as I zoom in more, it'll actually tell you when these dots were verified in mountain daylight time. And you have different choices for different satellites. MODIS and VIIRS are the most common. I usually leave them both turned on. But you'll also see something that was added right in the middle of last fire season called Go is Live here. If I turn that on, what that gives you is live satellite fire data every 5 minutes. And there's a legend up here that says this is a little bit old now, more than 60 minutes, I think. But when you have a real fire burning, you get live fire data and it's pretty high quality. And we were involved in a couple of fires last year where we were seeing stuff on here way before we were hearing about it on the scanner or anything else. So that's another really handy tool to use throughout the season. So you have all these overlay tools. They're all super handy. They can be clicked on and off easily. You have other things like public lands. Sometimes we have jurisdiction issues like in Marin, you find, a missing person's car. Who has jurisdiction? Where exactly is the line between state parks and federal lands or whatever? By turning that on, you get a legend and you can see who owns what land pretty easily. So, Matt just texted that he had to leave. So we are still here without him. So anyway, that layer is pretty handy too. And I think I've talked about most of these. So now let's go back to Alpine Lake and Marin, which has a little kind of rural stuff going on. You can see this map's not all that exciting for this particular layer, but there's things we can do to this. So I can go in here and say, we have a custom map that we use, and I've uploaded down here in my Marin SAR layers, and it's called Tom Harrison map. Actually, it extends off your view, but let me bring that up. So Tom Harrison's a pretty famous map maker guy. He does stuff in the Sierras as well, but he lives in Marin, and he's provided this map to us, which is pretty good, but it doesn't really give us a nice 3D topography look or anything like that. So one of the cool things we can do with SARTopo is we can blend base layers together in different percentages, and you can create very powerful maps pretty easily. So let me just demo that here. If I go to stack base layer, I'm going to add a second layer, and I'm actually going to scroll down to something called shaded relief right here. And that's basically just a gray map. See that? It's just texture and height. So what's cool is if I bring that down to like, 30% or so, 35%, all of a sudden my flat map has turned into like a nice 3D map. And if I go to Alpine Lake in Alpine County, for instance, I can switch over to a different layer like, hang on a second, let me bring up, you may not be able to see all of these because they're going off of my shared screen, but I'm going to bring up Forest Service 2016. Oh, why is that not? Oh, that should be working. Let me just do scan topo. There we go. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Alpine Lake in Alpine County. Looks like I fooled it this time. Okay, there we go. So we're up in the mountains now, and it's a good time to talk about topo maps. There are several different layers here, starting with the ancient, fire service maps here, which are still pretty handy at times, but they're not the best, as you probably all know. We find in most cases the Forest Service maps with fairly recent logging roads are the best. You have two choices, 2016 and 2013. Sometimes there's differences, and you can render full white if you want, or you can do mixture with vegetation as well. So using that same trick I just had, if I dial this up to 30, 35%, 40%, all of a sudden I get a nice 3D map up in the mountains. And that looks a lot better than a plain old flat Forest Service map. So I just want to make you guys aware that the blending of maps is another tool in the toolbox, and it's super handy. Another thing I'll do quite often is I'll go in here and I'll turn on as my second layer some satellite imagery like NAIP, which is here, and I can kind of zoom in and out when I'm looking at something. If I'm going down to this lake, kind of what's going on down near the shore. Oh, where are the roads? I'm going to turn on the map builder overlay so I can see the trails and roads. And now I can kind of go back and forth and kind of orient myself back to the map. I can just slide back and forth here. So having some of these layers up there can be super handy. So any questions so far? I apologize if you're experts at this, but I also want to make sure that people that aren't familiar with this, get some comfort with it. So if I go back now to Alpine Lake in Marin, there we go. Those maps aren't going to work there. So I have to find a different map layer that's available in my county. So one of the other topographic maps Matt has built himself is called Map Builder Topo. And it's quite a good layer, actually. It's, in fact, many times better than some of the government maps in terms of the vegetation shading and the nice mix between trails. You can see most trails show distances between junctions here as well, which is very handy, and so forth. So you may find that this built-in layer is maybe one of your best choices on a lot of searches. Right next to that is another one called Map Builder Hybrid. And Map Builder Hybrid is very cool because it's actually photorealistic. If I zoom in all the way, you're going to start seeing oak trees and things pop in underneath the map. So if I'm at the command post and I print this map at like 36 by 48 and hang it on the wall, and searchers are up looking at it, you have the full benefit of a topographic map, but you can actually see individual trees, or in this case, there's a golf course with sand traps, right? So as you get closer and closer, all those things come into focus. So that's a pretty cool layer as well, and one that I recommend using quite a bit. So moving along those things, I want to just touch on some other things that are pretty cool. Historic maps. Sounds kind of weird. What do you need those for? Well, I'm sure most of you know that the Forest Service and the government in general is really good about taking old things and antiquities off of maps. And when you're in gold country, let's say, and stuff, sometimes it's good to know where the old mine shafts are and all. And even in Marin, we have some areas like that. So it's pretty cool. You have full topo maps drawn in the 1880s and the early 1900s for pretty much all of California. I think maybe even the whole US. And I've used this several times, particularly when we're in gold country and all, to try to look at various hazards that are out there. So keep those in mind when you're kind of looking at odd things. We also have a bunch of national park stuff. And then the last thing I want to talk about in the default maps are live satellite imagery. So this is pretty cool. It's not going to be super high resolution, obviously, but again, in fire season, these can be really nice. This is a weekly live satellite image that comes out, and you can see here, this is taken today, and a few puffy clouds over the area. But it can be really handy on winter searches, like where's the snow line right now today? And you can kind of see, like, you know, are you well into snow or are you not? Where could that person be relative to the snow line? Things like that can be visually observed this way. Another thing that's kind of cool is you can also go MODIS daily or go as live. So that same satellite that was giving you the heat signatures of fires can give you a live image. That's not very high resolution, but if you have a fire burning or something like that, like we did up in Yuba, you can actually see the smoke coming off and what direction it's going, all live every 5 minutes. So again, it's not high resolution, but it's a pretty handy tool when you need it. And it's not too obscured by clouds. So those are kind of the main layers that are built in. I do want to talk about adding your own layers. So there are a couple of ways. One of the things we did originally is we added a ton of local area maps in Marin, and they are various patrol maps and ranger maps and things like that. And I added them. I host them on Amazon Web Services, and you can see down here Marin SAR layers are listed. So I can go in here and say I want to select the where is it? SAR. Did I put it on here? 1 second. Well, here's one. Water district patrol map. So, you know, where we have many of our missing persons out there, I can add that layer on there. So these will all appear for anyone on our team account. I also have 6-inch imagery that comes from the county that is available on their GIS server, and I just tap into that. And all of a sudden I get resolution. Once this zooms in, I can basically see a Coke can on the ground in terms of resolution. And so compared to Google, it can be really handy. If you have game trails and things like this game trail here, you can see them visually. So adding things like that for your county can be a really good tool and super handy because it just gives you another view to look at when you're trying to write a plan or figure out where someone went. Very, very nice tools. The issue with these kinds of maps is that they have to be added to a server, and you have to have some sort of super geek to put it all together, and you cut them into tiles and all this kind of stuff. That's kind of difficult. Matt and his guys recognize that. And so they came up with this concept of map sheets. And map sheets are meant to be smaller maps that are used in a specific area. And they are super handy. And the nice thing is you don't have to have a web host or anything for that. You essentially just upload them into SARTopo, and then you can share them with your team account or just keep them for your personal use. The other cool thing about map sheets is, since there could be 10,000 on here, because you can share them publicly as well, there might be thousands of them on here. You don't want to see a list of thousands of maps when you click on here. So what it does is it only shows you the map sheets that are relevant or exist in the area that you are looking at on the map right that minute. So I'm out in West Marin here. I'm going to click on stack a map sheet, and it's going to list just the ones that are available. So you can see, since this is a popular tourist area, some people have shared public trail maps. Some of these are kind of useless for what we do because they're low resolution and such. But you can see what some citizens may have added. Sometimes they're good. But you can also see that I've added my super useful Tom Harrison map as one of these, and my Marin Municipal Water District brand new SAR map that was created as a PhD project from some GIS guy. So now I have this really great map that I can use in the water district that shows all my social trails. So getting all that stuff kind of configured for your region is a really powerful thing again. And I encourage people to do that. There's another cool thing is when you have a map that's got a big legend and junk like this, you can hit this little button. Oh, it doesn't have it on this one. So if it has a clear border on it that's rectangular, it can recognize that and cut it off so that if you have 3 or 4 of these that nest together, it becomes a seamless map as well. So that's quite cool. So in this particular case, I'm in an area with fire, and I have all of our fire evacuation zone maps. When the fire guys created these and made them into PDFs to hand out to people, actually I got them off the web ultimately, they were already geo-referenced. So all I had to do was upload them. It took like 15 seconds and then share them to the team. So now I have, live fire maps for our whole county on here. Super handy again. If they're not already geo-referenced, like you have a park map PDF or a JPEG or something that you just happen to have, or you got off the web, then there's a small process you go through. You upload the map and it says, hey, I don't know where this map is. You have to geo-reference it. So essentially you go in and say, okay, this little water tank in the upper left corner is actually here on Google Earth. And then the lower right corner, same thing, this little object down here, and then it's geo-referenced. And sometimes you have to tune it a little, but it'll be precise within a few feet with just 5 or 10 minutes of effort. So one way or another, you can quickly get a map in here. I'll tell you what else happened one time on a search in Santa Cruz. We had a foster kid in really bad circumstances, and the agency that was responsible for them, actually, there were no roads going to the house. It was like really in the middle of nowhere. So they actually drew a hand-drawn map where the roads were and how to get in and out of the house and where you could go to from there. This kid disappeared. So we took that map and we just basically scanned it in here, and all of a sudden we had a map for the area, and we could draw it, we could trace the roads and everything. So super handy again. So I know I spent a lot of time on maps, but I think they're really important, and a good map makes or breaks your search pretty much, And with all of these other functions that have been added, like, wind plots here, for instance. So I can during a fire again, it's really powerful where you can see live wind maps. You can say, what's it going to be like tomorrow morning? And it'll draw the new arrows, hopefully. Yep, there they are. So there's just a ton of things on here that may not be obvious at first glance. And I really recommend spending some time on them because they can be really handy tools for your everyday SAR work. Okay.
Rich, we have a couple questions.
Yes, go ahead.
So the first one is, how often is the NAIP updated?
Yeah, so NAIP, I think he's done it about every 2 years roughly, and I think that's more or less the schedule of the government. Actually, it's less than that. So our 2015s are our latest. There's another one called Global Imagery here, which doesn't print well, but visually it's very high resolution. Let me just zoom in and demo that real quick. Actually, let me get rid of this map. But you can see it's pretty much as good as Google Earth in terms of image quality. See that? In fact, might even be better in some cases. So that's very high resolution. There's still an issue with printing, and I know Matt's working on it, but that's a great map layer, and it's more recent, I believe. Our county and many counties, maybe even Nevada's, they have these ortho maps that sit on a GIS server, and those guys are all a different breed. But I just basically started drilling through the server till I found them, and then I'm like figured out how to connect to them, and we could help you guys if that's something that you have access to. And those are updated pretty much every 2 years, and they're very nice maps, and again, super high resolution.
Great.
You also have Google if you're logged in on a team account. You also have as your top layer, Google Hybrid available, so you can have that as well, and that's generally, for most areas, this is 2021, so this is fresh. You cannot print Google layers though in here. That's the one caveat. Google does not like you to print their layers. Other question?
The other question is, where can where can I find legends for these maps? Are there any legends within SARTopo?
So yeah, so it depends on the layer. So most of them, like most of the base layers, like the topo maps, will not show the legends because they're continuous. But when you get into things like slope angle shading, you're going to see a legend pop up down in the lower left corner here. So here's a tiny little hill. You can see it's mostly red and yellow. So the slope is 30 to 45 degrees. Can everybody see that down there? And then if I go to geology, just for grins, that's a new layer, by the way. Not something super useful, I don't think, but there's a legend here too. And now I think they're just labeled. The rock types are labeled, for instance, somewhere. Public lands will have a legend. So down here, let's say Forest Service, National Park Service, BLM, and so forth, tribal. And that should be pretty accurate throughout at least all of California. MVUM maps, motor vehicle maps. You can click on that and it will show you a full set of legends for OHV trails and things, which were included in here pretty much for recreational users, but these can be great maps as well when you're doing off-road searches up in the mountains as well. So yeah, so just kind of look down in the left basically when you bring up one of these, and hopefully there's some sort of legend there for you.
Thank you. That's all the questions for now.
Okay, moving right along, map layers, map sheets. We talked about measuring a little bit, and then I'm going to get into building maps. But let me just go back to measuring for 1 second. There's a lot of stuff you can do in here. Point and elevation, sun exposure, things like that. We don't use that much. Parcel info I've already mentioned. But if I go down here and I right click on this, so that was a right click, I can say, position and elevation of that point. So it'll give me that in multiple coordinates and multiple units, and it'll tell me elevation 66 feet. It'll tell me the slope at that point. So when I'm building helicopter landing zones, for example, I'm looking around, I can set up custom shading to find, less than 5 degree landing spots, and I can go in and check them, and I can put a LZ on there if I want to. So things like that can be handy. Measuring distance is very easy. So I can say, I want to measure a distance, pretty straightforward. Click, 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 double click at the end, and it tells me that was 1,685 feet. Similarly, I can go in and measure parcel count structures, which I've already demoed, but area. So that's pretty handy when I'm building assignments. I only want, 60 to 70 acre assignments, let's say, in this terrain. I go in here, close the double click, and I've got a 13 acre assignment right there. So, and when I build assignments, those assignments will also record their area as well. So I can inspect those visually when I'm building assignments. So measure tool is super handy. And now let's get into putting stuff on the map and then kind of walk through all of that. And now that we've got the layout of everything. And I know, I guess we're good on time still, so that's good. So the interface for this has changed quite a bit in the last month. It used to be somewhat confusing at times. Actually, the one thing I didn't talk about, import and export. Let me do that real quick. And I want to demo one thing real fast. So importing is for importing either files that have other objects on or GPSs. So I could choose a file that's got like a GPS track that I downloaded, and I could hit choose file and find it on my desktop, and I could import it. So that's pretty straightforward. There's a thing called GPS.io plugin, which connects to Garmin GPSs, and I can you can actually see it up here. There's a little plugin, and I can import from GPSs through that plugin as well. And I'm going to talk more about that in a later session. And we're going to talk about cleaning up tracks and things like that and managing tracks. And then I can also export any or all of my objects from my map. I can export it essentially as a GeoJSON file, which is simply a full SARTopo backup. So one of the things I like to do on a search is maybe every half an hour, I just dump one of these files onto my computer just in case I do something like delete the whole search by accident or something bad like that. So call me paranoid, but I like to do that. I can also export more simplified things like simple GPX points and so forth. I can export KML files for Google Earth. Another thing I can do is pretty cool here. So let me jump over to a map that's got a ton of stuff on it. What is on here isn't important. It's a real search. That was I think we did 11 OPs in the end, trying to find this guy. But you can see this is pretty hard to see much of anything on. And I like to talk about this during my data management set. But one of the things I'd like to do on this search is be able to kind of look at it in 3D Google Earth style. But SARTopo is not really meant for that. And it's kind of redundant to build Google Earth into SARTopo. So one of the things you can do is you can hit this export button. And then you can say in the upper right corner, export a KML network link. And that downloads a little file, which will go away in a second. And when I do that, it's downloaded onto my desktop. And I double click on that and it brings up Google Earth. So let me just switch over to Google Earth Desktop real quick. I just want to demo this briefly because it is quite handy. Everyone see Google Earth now? Is it there? Okay, cool. All right, so this thing is live and dynamic. So what's cool about this is all of a sudden, people that are into Google Earth and you like to fly around and you like to, really study what's going on in a map or the data that's on a map, you can get in here, you can spin it around. You can look at the search from different angles and perspectives. And so I find this to be really handy. You see the outline of my search areas. You can see my tracks down in there. There's a couple of clues that we found. And so when I'm looking at, did I cover areas well or not? I see this hillside. I can see how far apart people were walking on there. It can be just another tool in the toolbox again, especially when you're in a oh, just found the MP. Nice. I assume that was the Tahoe one. Anyway, so that's a great tool as well. Just being able to switch that back and forth. A lot of people don't know about that functionality, and I find it really handy at times. So let me switch back to my other map and continue. Okay, there we go. All right. So let's get back to the simple map and let's start talking about objects. I'm going to go back to a very simple map, just a open street map, just to keep the background simple. And I'm going to move back out to my Alpine Lake in Marin here. Let me get rid of Google Earth in my background. It's driving me crazy here. 1 second. Don't save. There we go. All right. So I'm back out of my lake where we have a missing person, let's say. And I'm going to start talking about how to put objects on here and the different types of objects. So one of the things that changed on the interface is he's trying to make it more intuitive ultimately, but it's different if you've gotten very used to the old way of doing things. But right now, if you left click on here and drag around with my mouse pad or with a mouse, it moves the map around, which is kind of intuitive. And I can zoom in and out, obviously, with this control system here. But if I right click on the map here, it brings up a contextual menu of all the things I could do at a particular place on a map. So hopefully they're all covered here. I could add a new object here. I could add a marker because that's a singular point. I could add a clue, which is another type of marker. I could add a line or a polygon or a range ring or so forth. So that's kind of the idea here. So let's start with the most basic thing, a marker. It's going to go to wherever I right clicked. The cool thing is I can drag that marker around if I don't like where it is. I can also go down here and edit the coordinates of it and put it in a different place because someone phoned it, radioed in a clue. I can do that. I can give it a name like marker 1 or whatever is my protocol. And now I can also go in and change its style. And that's something we use a lot. And it's something that's changing a lot too. So when I click on the red dot here, it brings up a menu of all the symbols that are built into the system itself. And you also see down at the bottom, I have custom icons that are built in like marijuana grows and things like that, which we like to tag on certain counties when we're doing searches just to keep people safe. And we have extra ones like mountain lions and things like that that we added. But what you mainly have here are sets of points that we likely are to use. You'll have the standard ICS terminology. And if you don't remember what something is, you just hold your cursor over the top of it and it'll say incident command post or clue and so forth. So these are the fire symbols. We have the USAR symbols built in. And we also have basically the parks, National Forest Service symbols, and we tend to mix and match these. You can also change the colors of these when you use them. So there's a lot of different symbols. In this case, I'm just going to grab this X one and put it there. That's fine. One thing I want to add is that within a couple of weeks, we'll have a full set of fire symbology in there for evacuations and post-fire work. So we're trying to get that all finished up and have it ready for the core of fire season, along with some guidelines for doing that sort of work. So now I have a marker here. I can do things like edit it. So right here, if I click on this marker, left click, it gives me the option to edit it. So that's pretty nice. I can edit it. I can now drag it around. I can change the name of it, marker 2 or whatever I want. I can change the shape or color and so forth. So that's pretty straightforward. That's a marker. Let's do a line real quick. I'm going to right click and I'm going to click on line. So I'm clicking on a new line. Escape button lets me back up one click. Each time I click, it's going to put a new point on the map. And when I'm done with my line, I double click and it saves it. In this case, I forgot to name it. So I can go up here. I can either click on this itself and edit it, or I can go up in my menu on the left-hand column and hit edit here. And then I can go in and say it's line 1 or whatever. And I can change the color. Similarly to dots, lines have different colors you can set. And they also have, and a lot of people don't know about this, there's a lot of different styles here that you can set as well, including ICS fire symbology and stuff, or dotted lines or whatever you want. You can change the colors of them, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of functionality built in there as well. So I'm going to save that like that. You can see it's saved over on my left-hand column in the lines and polygon folder. I can also go up here now and turn those on and off, right? So I can turn the view of those on and off, and I can get more granular and just turn individual ones on and off within a folder here. I can also turn, as I mentioned, labels on or off. I'm clicking that labels hidden, labels shown sign here, and that's all good. So moving right along, I'm going to go to the next obvious thing, which is an area. I'm going to go new area, polygon. So let's do that. And I'm just going to draw a meaningless polygon. Bring it up here, double click, and I can do some cool things with this polygon now. I can click on it. It tells me it's 117 acres automatically, which is nice. I can also ask for the terrain stats of that. It'll show me the slope variation within there, the aspect ratio, the tree cover. It'll show me a lot of stuff. Sometimes that's very useful in doing assignments. The other thing it'll do is it'll show me the perimeter. So as I walk along this bar at the bottom, it shows that moving dot going around the perimeter. So I get a nice elevation profile of the perimeter if I need that. Same thing works on lines as well. So that can be pretty handy too. So there's a lot of stuff here that's just not obvious at first glance, but it's all in there. Similarly, I can go in here. If I go to my command post by clicking on command post up here, I can say that's where the person went missing. I can draw range rings on here. So another choice would be range rings. I can choose miles, which is fine. And I can do commas here. So I'm going to go half mile, 1 mile, 2 miles, 5 miles, just for grins. And then if I zoom out, you'll see all of those concentric circles for my range rings. So things like that are built in quite nicely. And so objects are pretty handy. Obviously, there's a huge range of them. I just touched on the main ones that you would put here. You could similarly put a clue if you're on a search. I found a shoe at this location, or someone radioed it in. I ordered them just to mark it. And, I can put in details on this and which team, if I had an assignment written, which team found the clue, and I can save the clue. So it's a pretty powerful tool as well. So let's talk about drawing things when you have kind of a messy environment briefly. And this is something, and I've got a little homework, voluntary homework assignment I'm going to give you guys at the end to take home and practice with. But one of the things we often do, I'm going to delete this. Delete. Okay, so one of the things we often want to do is maybe do an assignment or something to go down, say, a drainage. Or you want to follow, have a line follow a road or a trail, let's say. So in this particular case, I'm going to go down into the watershed here. We've got some trails. If I say right click, new line, all of a sudden, what I didn't talk about is this little menu up here in the upper left corner where it says snap to. I can say snap to OpenStreetMap, snap to lines that I've already drawn, snap to the Forest Service, the vehicle, mobile vehicle thing, or hydro features, which would be drainages, rivers, lakes, things like that. So in this case, I'm just going to do a snap to OpenStreetMap, and you're going to see yellow stuff light up here. So now this is a pretty powerful tool. If I was trying to write a search assignment, I can go to the start of this trail, click one time, and anchor it. I can go halfway down the trail till it snaps to it, click it one more time just to kind of register that point. I can go down the trail again, click, trail again, click. Now I can turn right if I want, go to this next trail, click, go up this Pine Mountain loop, click. And if that's the end of my assignment, I double click. So I get a nice clean line that follows the trail exactly. So as a planner, that's super handy. Likewise, if I have a drainage down here, I'm going to jump ahead for a second to a buffer assignment, which is basically a fat line. You know, we tend to send people down on line assignments on trails, and they walk down the center of the trail. We almost never want that. We almost always want to cover some width on either side of a drainage or a trail. So in this case, I've got some drainages here. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say, actually, I'm going to go over to the other menu, which allows me to also choose things. I'm going to click add. So this is another menu that shows everything. I'm going to jump down to SAR objects now. So we're going to get into the kinds of things that we do. And I'm going to go to a buffer assignment, and I'm going to click on that. You can see it has shortcuts 1 through 4 in increasing widths, or B if you just want the default menu. I'm going to click 1 because I want to build a skinny buffer. I forget the exact defaults that he used, but 1 is the smallest buffer. So I'm just going to press number 1 on my keypad, and the menu pops up. And now I have the snap to menu, but now what I want to do is snap to a drainage here. So let me get rid of that menu. So I'm going to snap to the hydro features, and hopefully it doesn't work. There we go. So let me find a drainage here. There we go. Okay, so you can see all the drainages appear on the map, which is pretty sweet. And let's say I want to search this drainage here, Swede Gorge. Should light up. And it doesn't. I've had that problem a couple times. Let me go back. Oh, I think I killed. Sorry about that. If I talk too much while I'm doing this, I wiped it out. So let me cancel that one. Let me go back to where we were. I do want to just demo this once. All right, there we are. I'm gonna go hit number 1 because I want a new drainage assignment. I'm gonna go down this Van Wyck drainage from the top to the lake. So I click once, go down, click again, go down. Oops. You just got to make sure you contact it. There you go. And then down here, when I finally get to the lake, I double click. And now you can see it's built a buffer assignment, which is a fat line basically encompassing both sides of that drainage. So again, these are like speed tools that really help you when you're cranking assignments out in a hurry. And they're very handy shortcuts. The shortcuts now are fabulous. So now we started talking about SAR objects. Let's talk about how you build, say, a proper assignment. The first thing you're going to want to have for an assignment is an operational period, since that's the first rule that we use for sorting data. So if I go up here to the add menu, you'll see when I get into SAR objects, the first one listed is an operational period. And that's really a folder for my assignments. Nothing fancier than that, but it has a couple of cool features. I can decide what color I want my assignments to be in my first operational period. I'll just pick blue for now, and I'll save it. So over here on the left now, you're going to see operational period 1. So I've already created one assignment here. I don't want to talk about our naming convention. I'm going to do a whole segment on assignment building and best practices in those. But let me just right click on this, or sorry, I keep forgetting it's new now. I'm going to left click on this, and it's going to let me edit this unnamed object. I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to call this assignment AA. Oops, letter AA, sorry. There we go. And down here, you'll see I can put it in operational period 1 since I've already created an operational period. And I can put all the stuff that you would put on a classic 104 form here. And again, we'll be spending tons of time on this later on in great detail because we've made some pretty big strides in how we just define assignments and print and communicate assignments in the last couple of years. So I can even do things, I can say I have a team size of 4. It's a high priority assignment, which doesn't appear on the printed version, by the way. I can say I want a high POD for responsive subject and then, medium and low. I can say, search 50 feet either side of drainage, blah, 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 blah. I can say there were no previous efforts and so forth. I can say you have to self-transport. I can say we're using VTAC 36R. Everything that we need to give that person for their assignment can be stored in here, and I hit save. So now over here, you'll see a summary of that assignment. It's going to be listed here. I can turn it on and off with the checkbox. I can turn an operational period on and off. So when I get into like a big advanced search, I'm going to start turning off a lot of the old operational periods and only focus on the new ones. I'm going to turn off the tracks maybe in some of the old ones and allow myself to really focus on the data I want to see. So in this case, I've got an operational period. I've got one assignment written. It's a buffer assignment going down a drainage. The second one I'm going to do is a line assignment. I'm just going to do a quick search of a trail. So I think that is called L in the new shortcuts. There it is. I'm going to give it letter AB because that's going to be my second assignment. And I'm going to snap to the OpenStreetMap trails. And hopefully some of these will light up. And I'm just going to do a quick search of, say, this trail right here. Oops. And I'm going to come up here. And I want to search up to this junction. Double click, and it saves. Now, I didn't fill in all the data. I can do that later if I want. There's something else called bulk operations, which allows you to populate all common themes for a search at the same time, like the comm channels that are all the same, or the search team sizes, or operational periods. And we'll talk about levering some of that at length later on as well. So anyway, so now I've got a couple of assignments written. The last type of assignment I want to talk about is area searching. So similarly, I can go over here and say I want an area search, say south of this little trail line, right? Azalea Hill Trail down to the water, let's say. So I can say A, and it gives me area search. I'm going to call it assignment AC. And then I'm going to go out here and I'm going to use these natural trails as a buffer for my assignment. Oops, I'm going to try to. There we go. Get out here. I'm going to go up to this trail junction. Then I'm going to kind of cut down a contour here down to this trail. And then I'm going to cut back down to here and work my way around. And hopefully this will stay inside my parameters that I set for my size of assignments and things. You can see it's the wrong color right now. And it's the wrong color because I didn't put it into the operational period. Once I put it in there, the colors will match. Another thing which I'll talk about a lot later is displaying assignments within operational periods. You can see here, there's a display settings thing at the bottom of assignments. If I click on that, I have multiple choices. I can show color by operational period, which I'm doing now, which is blue. I can show it by random colors, which I use all the time when I'm printing a map, because if I have assignments that abut one another, you want to be able to see the difference between them and the borders between them. So having blue, orange, green, red, all next to each other is much better than seeing blue, 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 blue when you print a map. So I always like to use random for printing, and that's mentioned in the little homework exercise I'm giving you. I can also show it by resource type. So if I have canine assignments, water assignments, type 1 assignments versus type 2 assignments, I can differentiate all those and see them all at a glance. Another tool which is super useful is status. So status, if I go back to one of these are all just drafted right now as status. But what I can actually do is operationally, when we're in play and we're in, out there, I can say this one's ready to go, but it hasn't been sent out yet. these guys are out in the field searching right now, and these guys have completed their assignment. So that's really useful at times if you have an extra overhead person who can do those sorts of things for you, and they can kind of keep track through operations of what's going on in the field. Once again, I keep bringing up fires because they've tended to be some of the largest operations. But when you have a lot of government officials around and mayors and like, where are we? How much have we gotten done? Having a big TV screen up there, and you can say, well, the blue ones are complete, the orange ones are in progress, and the red ones are heading out right now. So being able to display the same data multiple different ways is very nice. And once again, I can turn my labels on and off here and so forth. So what I've done now is I've kind of, in a basic way, created a search plan here. It's not a very good one, but I have a few different objects here. I'm going to display my stuff in random colors now. And what I want to talk about next is getting into the concept of printing here. So let me just check if I missed anything that I knew I wanted to cover here. Operational periods. Oh, that's good. Snap to. It's kind of hard when you don't have a PowerPoint on your side here. Objects, there we go. Yep, okay, good. So that's all good. Now let's talk about fine tuning my plan. I want to edit some of the stuff that I've done here. So some of these things are maybe the way I want them, and some of them are maybe not. And I need to go back and edit. I don't want to just delete stuff and start over, but I want to have the option of changing things a little bit. So in this case, any object, and this is a new improvement. It used to get very messy when I had 3 or 4 days of tracks and then 3 or 4 days of assignments, some of which overlap, and all kinds of objects and clues. Sometimes you used to have to go in and try to get right on it, and then you could select the item that you were after. The way it works now is you click on any point in the map, and it's going to give you a list of all the things vertically that might be on that map that you put on that map. So they might be assignments or tracks or markers or anything that's in that immediate area. In this case, I have one line and I have one assignment. So I can choose which one of these I want to edit. So in this case, let's say I didn't like my line and I click on edit. The simplest thing I can do is start dragging the dots around and change the shape of my line. So you can see that when I drag one dot like this, it'll change the shape of the line, and it always gives me an intermediate dot. So I can do an infinite number of corrections and adjustments to my line. I can drag it up here, all those kinds of things. When I'm all done editing, I can also delete the endpoint of this one. I can right click on that and say, oops, I think, or left click on that now. Should be able to delete that vertex. It's not letting me do that. That's interesting. Okay, so I'm dragging that around. I've got different dots here. It's all good. And then when I'm happy with how I've modified it, I hit OK and it saves it again. I can do the same thing on these on this area search. I can right click on it and I can say I want to edit that. And then I can start dragging. This one's a little messier because I put it against the trail, but I can start, editing it and adding sections to it and modifying it however I want. And then I can save it again. Same idea. So, you don't have to give up all the work that you've already done. The next thing that's interesting is I can go in and left click on it and hit edit, or I can also do modify and copy. So modify has a bunch of additional options. If I click on that, I can extend it, I can split it, I can reverse the arrows if it was a line that had arrows on it. And so I could join it to another line and so forth. So there are many options here that you can do. One of the ones you might do regularly is when you're editing bad tracks, for instance, I might right click in the middle here or left click in the middle and say modify split. And it'll split this right at the point that I clicked on into 2 different lines. And now you can see I have 2 things called line 1 over here, line 1 and line 1. If I change the color of one just to demo that, you'll see that, in fact, it now has 2 different colors where I split it. So you can split things into multiple assignments and so forth that way. So the editing function is pretty good. You can do a lot of stuff. It's used mostly for cleaning up area assignments, honestly, and then for cleaning up tracks when you import them. We're going to have a reasonable session on tracks, because you've all seen horrible maps with garbage tracks all over them. So we want to kind of give you some best tips for how to efficiently clean up bad tracks on maps. So at this point, we've kind of got our whole search plan together, such as it is. And we want to start rendering PDFs and things. So let me talk about that briefly. If I go into this print module right here and hit print, it brings up a new dialog. And this new dialog is right here. Okay. So I can move using this red dot. I can move things around. And I can center this as an 8.5 by 11 right up here. I can give it a title if I want, map. I can put UTM grid on there and lat long ticks if I want. And then I can say, generate a PDF. And this will generate a PDF of that map, just like I'm looking at it there. And there we go. It also has a barcode down here. You scan that with your phone, and that map will appear on your phone instantly. So that's how you print. And then on the homework assignment, we'll have one quick rendering of a map as well. So I did want to mention that. Hold on one second. Okay, there we go. All right, so any questions so far? Is this like too fast or too slow, or?
There's one question about when editing different objects, will it default to what you had set up to snap or for snapping to?
No, you probably have to reselect that. So if I go to this line and click edit, in fact, I'm not sure snap to even works when you're in edit mode. It doesn't actually. So yeah, in edit mode, it's a manual process. And sometimes it's easier just to delete it and redo it if it's something that you can use a snap to on or something like that. So kind of keep that in mind. So what I'd like to kind of, so what I hope to at this point is kind of get you through the interface, at least make you aware of some of the deeper functionality in the basic setup here, and kind of show you how to create a basic map that you could generate a PDF from and hand out as an assignment. So the little homework thing that I'm sending out is a pretty straightforward one that lets you kind of practice each one of these techniques if you haven't done it. If you're super comfortable with this already, don't worry about it. Yeah, you don't have to do it. But I think, to the extent any of this looks confusing or hard to follow, definitely spend, half an hour on that exercise later. What I'd like to do now is kind of switch back and talk about mobile stuff a little bit, because this has kind of told us about the desktop interface. I want to talk about some of the mobile functionality and kind of how that works. So I'm going to switch over to hopefully my PowerPoint that works. All right. Do we see mobile mapping? Is the page changing?
Yes.
Ah, beautiful. Okay. So I want to talk about just the two primary tools that we use in SAR. I think up until a year ago, there was only one really, which was Avenza. Avenza is pretty nice in that it's fully offline capable. You load a map at the CP into your, if they have internet there, or on your way to the search, you can upload your search map, and then all you have to do is record tracks and email them to the command post, and it's all super clean. And instead of looking at a tiny little Garmin with a little interface, you have a nice big color map on your phone. So that's how we used to do things. We've kind of switched over now to the SARTopo map in most places. Are you guys using it in Nevada a lot at this point or not?
Yes, we're using SARTopo.
Yeah, okay, good. The mobile. So I find it really great. It's a little tricky when you don't have cell, but it still works. So what we found on all the larger searches in recent months anyway, is that it's a combination of these things. Some people will be old school. Carta especially will tend to use regular GPSs. They might use Avenza for a reference or SARTopo for a reference. Nevada County shows up, they're going to use the SARTopo mobile app probably. But you have to be able to kind of support all of these different ones. So I do want to run through this for the people that aren't super familiar, but let's start with Avenza. Avenza is available in both app stores. You download it. The free version used to be unlimited, and now they've made it difficult. So you can only have 3 offline maps in the free version. Some people get hung up on that. So if you go up to search and you've got 3 already, you're going to have to delete a couple or save them to your phone. But the beauty of this is you can navigate on it easily. You can find out where you are. You can record tracks on your phone. And then the trick is to use your Dropbox or whatever to store extra maps on your phone and get around the 3-map limit. But, you know, for those of you who've been on some of the larger searches, here's Matt, in fact, at the campfire. And right behind him is a barcode for the PDF that we generated in SARTopo that then gets scanned by the app and then loaded into your phone. And it's pretty easy, just-in-time training for searchers that aren't super familiar with it. It works well for deployment via email as well. You can send it out to incoming teams when they still have good cell coverage. It's great, obviously, for those who've used it a lot to find out if you're really still in your search area or not, or how well you're covering your search area. It's so much better than a Garmin. And we've done some analysis, by the way, of SARTopo or CalTopo Mobile and Avenza Mobile on both Android and iOS, and compared it with real Garmin's, assuming you have them all kind of held similarly. And honestly, there's not much difference. And in some of our tests, the phones have done better than the real Garmin's, which is very surprising to me. So I wouldn't worry that the old paradigm was, oh, the phones are not accurate enough for SAR. They definitely are accurate enough for SAR. So anyway, I do want to run in here, do a little demo. This is a little movie, but here's, it's going to show you, for those who haven't done it, how you load a map into Avenza. This one's on Android, but I just want to kind of run through it. I've loaded the map here. You see my little icon for Avenza here. I'm going to press play, and this is going to be a little movie that plays. Hopefully everyone can see it. I'm going to click on Avenza icon. It's going to open up, and I'm going to click on the plus sign down here because I want to import a new map that was printed out of SARTopo. I'm going to say download or import a map, the orange choice. Click on that. And in the upper right corner, you see the little QR code here. I'm going to touch that QR button. I could type in a URL down there, but it's a lot easier just to click on that QR code, and it's going to open my camera up. So when I click on that, my phone camera is going to open, and here's my SARTopo. And instantly, as soon as it sees that barcode, it reads it and imports the map. And then it takes a little bit of time to render. The letters there are the 3-letter ID for the map in Avenza, in SARTopo. And you can see the map is loaded and it's centered on my house right here. I can zoom in, I can pan around. It says that's me and my blue phone right there. And I'm looking to the northeast right now. And down below, I can click on this. I can set the units. I've got it defaulted to UTMs here. And I can start recording information on this map. So if I go to the next slide, I just want to demo again how this works. So I've got my map loaded. Just for reference, there are several buttons here. There's a location button, where am I? That'll center the map on my current GPS location. I can add a marker, just like I can in SARTopo, which is this little pen. I can record tracks via the 3-dot menu. And when I'm all done, I can share my data and email it back to the command post. People get hung up on this and often send back an orange bar, believe it or not, because if you follow what looks logical in this app, sometimes you just email an orange bar. And I have no idea why they haven't fixed that. You can also change units, as I mentioned, by clicking on the unit button, and you can go to lat long or whatever else you might want to use. So here we go. Let's just do a little demo again. I'm going to play a little video. Here I am moving around on my map. I want to start recording tracks. So I've already hit the location button. Where am I? Okay, there I am at home. Okay. And then I want to put a marker on here. So move it over and say, I want to put a marker right there on the map. I'm going to name it something, ICP or something. And then I hit OK and save it. And that marker will appear on the map, and I can download that to headquarters when I get back to the command post. Next thing I want to do is record tracks. So I open that 3-dot menu, click on record GPS tracks off of the menu, and shows me where I am and compass headings and things. And I hit start tracking. There we go. And I start recording my tracks. So that's super easy, works really well. And I actually ran this for like 30 seconds, so bear with me. while I'm walking around the house and getting a track recording. I swear I tell bad jokes, but I don't have any right now. And in a second, it'll show a little bit of distance that I've traveled around my house. And when it's done, it will, a couple more seconds, come on. Because I do want to show the end part of this, because that's where mistakes often get made. Still running. Oh, stopped. Hang on. There we go. So now okay. So now it's saving. Wait, let me go back. All right. So now I'm going to go down and save my layers. Then I'm going to click on this and export them. And I'm going to pick GPX because that's our common format that we like to use. And then I'm going to export it to my email app at the bottom. So I'm going to click on export, and the iOS one looks pretty similar. And then I'm going to choose Gmail and send it to the plans section chief or whoever's collecting GPX tracks. So that's kind of the concept behind Avenza. It's served us well. I think a lot of teams are still more comfortable with that than SARTopo mobile app, but I think we're going to have a pretty steady transition over time towards the SARTopo mobile app, which is running SARTopo. So talking about this, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because we're kind of running out of time, but there are obviously iOS and Android versions available. It's only been around about a year, but it's matured a lot in that time. Matt's put a lot of his development effort with his team into marrying up the databases or the code bases between the normal desktop version and the mobile version. And the goal is to get pretty much very similar functionality in both. And we're getting pretty close to that. Obviously, the big features are you can record searcher tracks in real time. It works online and offline seamlessly. You can put any of your local team maps permanently on there. And map sheets in particular are very easy to sync to your mobile app. So we actually held at our monthly meeting, we would pull everyone together and say, all right, we're going to manually walk through this. I want everyone on the team to have these 4 map layers from Marin County. So that when we go out in the woods, everybody's got the right maps and they're always on their phone. So you might have to do that a couple times, but it's worth doing to make sure people have at least 1 or 2 good clean sets of maps. And we'll do a little bit more on this later, but since you guys are already using it, I don't want to spend a lot of time just introducing it at this point. What I would like to do is just mention briefly the homework thing I'll send out. It's the same area I was showing you, Alpine Lake and Marin, and I have a handful of assignments that I've defined pretty clearly on it. And if you haven't done this a lot already, I'd encourage you to spend a little time working on it and building this particular map. It's going to look just like this when you're all done. And I've got pretty detailed instructions on how to do it. And then use Avenza to record a track on a map in your neighborhood. Make a little map in SARTopo, load it in your phone, walk around your neighborhood, and upload it back to the team map. I've got a map that you can upload that to if you're so inclined. And then the third extra credit would be go out and record some tracks on SARTopo mobile if you haven't done it already, aren't comfortable with it, because it does take a little getting used to, and it's a great system. So that's about it for tonight. I wanted to at least touch on the mobile parts of it and make sure people are aware of it, because we are moving to it, but it's not that critical in the context of trying to teach the search management side of things, because this is more of the end user part of it. The planning side is what we're going to be focusing on. So as we move into the next SARTopo planning session, which is, I believe, week after next, we're going to spend a lot of time on planning, how to build really good plans, how to analyze your plans within the system, how to lever your plans, how to organize a large search plan, those kinds of things. And we'll really get into some nitty gritty there. Any questions on this intro part? And I apologize for those who are super comfortable with it already. And I'm sure I probably lost some people that have not used this much so far as well. And if you are in that latter category and you're stuck or you feel really lost on certain things, at any point, shoot me an email, and I'm happy to set up a little side Zoom session where we can get a handful of people together and go through any Q&As you have along the way throughout the course. So happy to do that as well. Any thoughts or comments? Too slow, too fast? Just right? Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So I have the mobile app. The mobile app is different than the desktop app for SARTopo. And so can I do everything on the mobile app that I would do on a desktop?
There are a few exceptions. Some of the granularity on the desktop app is better. In other words, I think I showed you guys how you can turn labels off by folder and things like that.
Right.
There's good granularity. In the mobile app right now, you can only turn all the labels on or all the labels off, but you can get all the same maps on there. You can get all the same objects on there. You can draw things on there to some extent, although you really wouldn't want to, but you can certainly record any kinds of dots. You can edit the types of dots, the types of lines you add, the types of tracks you add. All that stuff is built into the mobile app. And as I mentioned, in fact, I could hang on a second. Let me share my screen for just a second, if that's okay. If we got another minute.
Yes.
I'm going to share my iPhone. Here we go. Through the magic of Zoom. A plugin is required. I've already done this. Must be a new plugin.